Winter. Damn. Icy winter. The streetlights in this park, as always, barely worked. The branches of the trees, covered in frost, reached out to me like dead fingers, trying to touch my skin. I walked alone in this godforsaken place, hoping to find some peace after a long day. But the silence in this park was different. It pressed down, oppressed, and reminded me of my own loneliness. I tried not to think about the darkness around me, but suddenly I noticed something in the distance, a silhouette slowly moving towards me. It was huge, unnaturally tall and broad-shouldered. Squinting, I saw that it wore a mask, a terrifying, distorted mask that immediately filled me with a deep sense of dread. In the light of the rare, flickering lamps, I could make out something long and sharp in its hand, resembling a knife. My heart started pounding harder, as if it wanted to break out of my chest. I took a step back, then another. At some point, he also began to move faster. The man in the mask quickened his pace and soon was almost running. His movements were jerky, as if every effort was difficult, but at the same time, he confidently approached me. "Hey!" his hoarse voice rang out. "Stop!" I wasn't going to obey. Every instinct screamed one thing: run, and I ran. And I ran. The ice and snow under my feet made running dangerous, but fear gave me a dexterity I hadn't expected from myself. The entire park echoed with the sound of my footsteps and the shouts of my listener. "You can't escape," he shouted at my back. "I'll find you anyway." But I didn't look back. My only goal was to get as far away as possible. Breathing became harder. The air was icy like needles in my throat. Ahead, I saw a playground, and without thinking, I decided to hide there. Navigating through old, snow-covered swings and slides, I found a small hiding place in a treehouse. Crouching inside, I tried to breathe as quietly as possible, listening to the surrounding sounds. My heart was pounding loudly, and it seemed that it could be heard for miles around. Footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps. They were getting closer. The footsteps turned into the creak of snow under the weight of the enormous pursuer. I heard his breathing, ragged, heavy, almost animalistic. He was close. Every inhale and exhale sounded like a confession of murderous intentions. "I know you're here," he whispered, and his voice seemed very close. "You can't hide from me." I felt my hands shaking with fear. The pain in my chest from the tension became unbearable, but I couldn't allow myself to make even the slightest sound. The man passed by my hiding place, and for a moment I thought he had lost the trail. But then the footsteps stopped, and I heard him turn around. "Come here, little one," his voice sounded again, and this time it was almost gentle, which made it even scarier. "I just want to talk." My heart was pounding furiously, and I felt a trickle of sweat running down my cheek. Thoughts of how to get out of here alive swirled in my head. Looking around, I noticed a small window on the back wall of the treehouse. It was narrow, but possibly wide enough for me to squeeze through. The man took a few more steps towards me, and I realized there was no more time. Crawling to the window, I cautiously began to climb out. The boards under my feet creaked, and I held my breath, praying he wouldn't hear. When I finally found myself outside, the cold air hit my face. I jumped to the ground and ran without looking back. It felt like I was running forever until I reached the road. The streetlights here were brighter, and I finally felt some of the fear easing. But suddenly, I heard the familiar hoarse voice behind me. "Did you think you could escape?" I turned sharply and saw him, the same man in the mask, standing under the light of a street lamp. His face was hidden, but his eyes burned with a mad fire. He still held the knife in his hand. "You made a mistake coming out of the shadows," he said, taking a step forward. I felt cold sweat running down my back. This time, I knew I couldn't run away. The man was approaching faster, and I could almost feel his breath. At that moment, headlights appeared around the corner. The car stopped nearby, and the driver got out. "Hey, what's going on here?" he shouted, seeing us. The man in the mask stopped and, without a word, rushed back into the darkness of the park. The driver ran up to me, grabbed my shoulders, and shook me. "Are you okay? What happened?" But I couldn't answer. My voice was gone, and I just nodded, showing that we needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. The driver helped me get into the car, and we quickly left that scary place. I never returned to that park again. My fear became my constant companion, and the hoarse voice and terrifying mask haunted me in nightmares. But worst of all was knowing that this man was still there, in the dark, waiting for his next victim.